I'm going to show you how to crack the code on lowering your average blood sugar. This will help you say goodbye to those chronic illnesses. Step 1, choose the right fuel. If your average blood sugar is high, we first need to fuel your body with fat. This often means switching the fuel that you burn. Why? If you fuel on carbs or carbohydrates, you must refill that fuel often. Fat, on the other hand, is a steady, slower burn. Fat not only satisfies our hunger, but it delivers a solid energy at a lower volume of food. All of these are a win when lowering your average blood sugar. Instead of adding that carb fuel every 2 to 3 hours, you can feel satisfied from fueling your body from fat every 6 to 12 hours. Not only is this a fewer number of times of eating per day, but the satisfaction from that fuel is a steady level of sugars. Fueling from fat versus carbs also reduces the amount of insulin, and this is where the real improvement comes from. Insulin chases blood sugar, and you swallow a handful of carbs and up goes the sugar, followed by the wave of insulin. This game of cat and mouse causes pathology, that chronic inflammation inside our bodies at a cellular level, and that's where chronic diseases begin. Swallow a high-fat, low-carbohydrate meal, and the blood sugars don't rise as sharply, and much less insulin is needed. That's a win for every single cell. Average blood sugars improve when the volatility of the blood sugars are less. So take your total carbohydrates down to 20 per day. Yes, I said total, not net. This forces you to grab those calories from fat, whether you're eating them or you're dining in, reaching for those stored calories within your fat cells. This, either way, delivers a stable level of energy and less fluctuations in your sugar. Next, we're going to watch for a stall by calculating your DBR. Now that you use fat as fuel, the average blood sugar drops. Lower blood sugars equal a lower insulin within your body. And this is when people start to lose weight and feel better. This shift in your chemistry is awesome for a while, but a few weeks into burning fat as your main fuel, and your body adapts to this new chemistry. And many stall out on the ketogenic diet because that's all the further they take it. A closer look at their chemistry shows that the insulin that was at a toxic level has lowered, and although things improved, their body now adjusted to this less toxic situation. How do you know if your body's adapted to the new, lower than before insulin? This is one of those instances in medicine where we measure what insulin controls. And the two most powerful things that insulin controls is the blood sugar and the production of ketones. Yes, point-of-care testing allows you to check your blood glucose and blood ketones in 1 meter. This point-of-care testing allows you to check what your insulin is doing in your body this day. Glucose and ketones are highly dependent on how well or not well your insulin is working. By measuring these two every day, when your glucose stops improving, your ketones will plummet. Folks write into the channel all the time and say, Dr. Bosworth, my ketones are hardly measurable. I'm doing everything right. And they report that their blood sugars are better than they used to be. And this tells me that their system has adapted to this new level of insulin. During this phase, they will fail to lose much weight. Their abundant energy has faded away, and they can't seem to find many ketones in their system. The hack is check both of those numbers at the same time. You can identify this problem quickly without waiting weeks in that stalled position and then giving up on what could have been a great plan. Measure glucose and ketones at the same time in a ratio of sorts. To simplify these numbers, I've instructed them to take the big number, their glucose, and divide by the little number, the ketones. And that's what we call the Dr. Boz ratio, or the DBR. If you want your average blood sugars to continue to improve, keep your Dr. Boz ratio less than 100. Those DBRs of less than 100 means you're winning the game against insulin resistance. And that's what got you here in the first place. When the DBRs rise above 100, the glucose improvement flatlines. At the same time, the ketones drop to nearly unmeasurable. And this means you're not improving your average glucose. This is that stall. This is also a sign that you're still very insulin resistant and you need to add some stress to that metabolism. Check your Dr. Boz ratios to keep up with how your metabolism is doing on a day-to-day basis. 2 meals per day. Yes, that's the next advice on lowering your blood sugar. Once you're keto adapted, you can reduce the number of feedings per day because of how long your fuel lasts. This 2 eatings a day is particularly important for adults. Once you're keto adapted, the ability to eat twice a day is very attainable. Your fat-based metabolism will carry you through with solid energy and very little hunger. It's those daily habits in our life that will tease us into the temptations of snacking throughout the day or eating things that are not on the list. This is a difficult process to fix, but it's also a sabotage for anybody trying to lower their average blood sugars. Keeping to just 2 meals per day without snacking is a critical step in lowering your blood sugar. Next, eat when the sun shines. After you stretched to only 2 meals and you removed the snacks, don't eat after the sun goes down. To decrease your risk of chronic illnesses, you have to learn that the sun is your timer. If you're trying to make supper and get it all done before the sun goes down and you don't get there before that sunset, you need to pack up that food and eat it the next day. Put it in the fridge and say no. The worst time to eat is nighttime, and it's because of what's naturally happening inside our bodies when we're sleeping. Do not eat after sundown. It is really one of the most critical steps to fixing this problem. Next, we're gonna slide your eating window closed. Instead of those 2 meals being over 6 hours, allow calories to enter thy mouth for only 5 hours, or maybe 4. First, we ask you to eat only 2 meals per day, and that narrowed your eating window. Then we ask you to only eat during daylight hours. And for many people, that is all the metabolic stress they need to improve those chronic illnesses. But if you are still struggling with elevated average blood sugars and you want to reverse that risk, take your eating window and narrow it. Your eating window officially opens during the first calorie that you eat or swallow during the day. This includes that morning coffee. If you add a bunch of cream or sweeteners, even if they're no-calorie sweeteners, to your morning drink, that's when your eating window opens. Set the timer. Now, the eating window is open either as long as your timer lasts, which could be that 4, 5, or 6 hour window, or sundown, whichever one comes first. If you're struggling with a high hemoglobin A1C, this trick is a fantastic fix for a stalled improvement. Next, we're going to talk about lowering your stress. This means you actually need to lower the overall production of that stress hormone called cortisol. When I'm trying to assess somebody's stress, the number one, first, most important question I ask them is, what time did you go to bed last night? And how many hours did you sleep consistently? The sleep schedule is the number one predictor for how well that cortisol is doing. If you want to watch blood sugars rise, go with a short night's sleep. Boom, they rise right out the roof. A persistent level of decreased sleep also sends your cortisol rising chronically. And this is a nightmare because it's hidden. Here's a hint. The word midnight should actually be in the middle of the night, not what time you're going to bed. If you're doing all these things well, you're sleeping well, you're only eating 2 meals per day during daylight hours, you're keeping that eating window at about 6 hours per day, it's time to drop an F-bomb once a week. Go 36, 48, or even 72 hours without eating. Yes, you need to push into the zone of fasting. Fasting stands for no food for at least 36 hours. It is remarkable. When I'm coaching a diabetic to reverse their diabetes, we get them to this level of a strong metabolism, and then we watch what the amazing F-bomb can do. You'll need to find a rhythm that fits within your life so that you can fast weekly. Practice and plot. Patients who are trying to lower their average blood sugar cannot make a rapid change and then only hold it for a short period of time. They cannot slack off and start adding snacking in the evening. This will sabotage their progress. Having those 2 meals per day during daylight hours needs to happen on the weekdays, on the weekends, and a steady improvement of your metabolism will happen. Twice a week, staying up past midnight ruins their progress. When you're breaking the rules more often than you're following them, you really aren't going to see this reverse. This practice and plot involves extending yourself some grace when you screw it up, but then getting right back on track. Use the workbooks that allow you to not only plot your Dr. Boz ratio, but also look at how well you kept your eating window closed and was it during daylight hours. Use a monthly hemoglobin A1C to check what was the true average throughout the month. I recommend patients check that once a month until it's in the normal range. And once you're there, check it a few times a year to make sure you stay there. Not sure how to check average blood sugar? Check out this video. I teach you the multiple ways that it can be checked and then which one I recommend.